Let's go. All right, so I wanted to welcome Simon here from a company called LeadRise. I'm really excited to, welcome him to one of our stats masterminds. This has been a hot topic with many of our teams and brokerages, so super excited to jump in. Those of you that haven't met me before, my name is Jennifer Staats. I'm the owner of Staats Solutions. We run the operations and marketing of brokerages and teams nationwide. With the shifting market, I think leads have been a big one. So Simon, can you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about how you got into this and what makes you guys a little bit different.
Absolutely, yeah. First of all, thank you for having me. This is great. I'm looking forward to getting into some meaty topics here. But yeah, just a little bit of an intro about myself. I've been really building and leading large sales teams in technology, really in Silicon Valley the last 20 years. After doing that for a while, I'd been running ads and doing a few different things in the e-commerce space and other kind of industries. And so I switched over probably about 6+ months ago now. And it was really a chance for me to take everything that I'd learned in building those teams and then really kind of start implementing that in the real estate niche specifically. So I've always loved real estate personally, and just saw a lot of broken lead systems out there, honestly, that we need to really do a lot better. And that's what we're doing for our clients. So it's good.
Amazing. I'm so excited about this. I think that's really the reason why we're here. I think some of our most successful webinars have been about like conversion and leads and stuff like that, because especially with just the shift and the way things are going, that's so important right now to many of our teams. So, there's so many different online strategies out there. It seems like all of our agents are struggling with this. So what are we missing?
Yeah, I think there's a few observations that I made, coming into this that I just kept seeing coming up time and time again. And, in that past life of mine, a lot of the work was building client acquisition systems, for large organizations. So, and it was a common theme there too. It's just that, sometimes the teams were a bit bigger. And so it was able to, you could kind of work through these things. But there's a few kind of big pieces, but there's one that keeps coming up time and time again. And actually, before I dive in and say what I think it is, and what I kind of have seen and I know it is, I'd love to ask anybody on the call here just to maybe can type in the chat. I know we've got a growing number of people on here, but just type in the chat. What would you say is the number one thing, the number one obstacle that gets in the way of converting online leads? What would be that challenge? And I'm going to take.
I know what I think it is, but I'm excited to see what everybody thinks.
Absolutely, everybody's dying to jump in. Well, who's going to go first?
I think it's the follow-up. I feel like that's where I see when I'm monitoring CRMs and stuff like that. Like, I just feel like it's easy for agents to take that initial call and then like building the system for follow-up or just actually doing the work is where I see sometimes it's dropping off.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got a couple of people weighing in the chat. So bad follow-through, poor communication.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's so many different nuanced kind of sides to this, but it's exactly it. The number one thing is consistency. Right. And I think the big gap is not seeing this as a true end-to-end system. Mm-hmm. And so that was for me one of the things that I had an immediate affinity with is I've been building systems for years. And so there is a certain mindset that comes with treating something as a system. Exactly at each stage through that process that it is a system. And so you turn it up here, you turn it down there. And that's how you manage it, right? Instead of really focusing on one piece of the puzzle or two pieces of the puzzle, and you get those great, but you don't have that end-to-end system.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we see a lot. Like, yeah, there's a cash buyer that calls you and they want to go see houses tomorrow. Agents are all over it. But when there's like an actual follow-up plan, that's where I'll be digging into Follow Up Boss or something. And I'm like, oh, well, you got all these leads, but you never did anything with them. So that's great. I mean, what kind of system have you seen be really successful?
Well, I think that there's, in the systems that are out there, and I mean, first of all, we just have to acknowledge here that there is such a dazzling array of different options. I mean, on the internet, there's, false promises everywhere. There's, everybody's got a shinier toy, and there's, it's hard sometimes. I think, first of all, it's overwhelming for people who are not doing this day in, day out. I mean, setting up a client acquisition system is not necessarily what people got into real estate for, right? They get into it because they love building relationships and really helping people. And so I think that's the first thing, is it's hard to spot the themes. But again, when you're really familiar with systems, there are a few key patterns that you keep seeing come up time and time again.
Yeah.
And for me, when a system is really, really working well, this particular type of system, client acquisition system, it's really three key pillars and ingredients that tend to be working really, really well. And actually, I'm just going to, for the sake of clarity, I'm just going to share a quick slide that I think will help.
Absolutely.
I'm super visual, so I like to have a slide.
I mean, let's be real here. We have a bunch of real estate agents on there, and most of them are visual too. So
That's great. I'm in good company. Let me see. Can you see that okay?
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, the first of these three pillars is you've got to obviously have a significant amount of consistent lead volume that's coming in. And we'll talk, about some of the metrics for that in a bit, but really making sure that you've got cost-effective paid advertising is like number one thing. If you don't have the lead flow, everything else grinds to a halt. It's the fuel in the car, right? And yes, it might not be premium grade. It might be a kind of lower grade fuel or a mix of different fuels, but we have to have that in. And the most scalable way to do that, Sphere is great. And it's super important, and we all know, but it's also, if that's all you have, it's a path to feast and famine, right? Usually, because you have a quiet period and everything slows down, you get busy again. That takes a bit of time to work back into the system. So having an effective, constant flow of inbound leads is a really important piece of the puzzle. Then the second piece is that as they come into whatever platform you're using, making sure that you've got not just automated nurture flows, but nurture flows that, one, sound natural, and two, actually get conversation going. And this is where actually there's a lot of AI going on right now. People are experimenting with AI, and you've got companies out there saying it's going to change the face of everything. And maybe in this piece here, this is probably where AI can help, but it's still got a ways to go, right? Because you're looking for true, organic, natural conversation, not just ticking the box.
Yeah.
And then the third, which again, coming into this was a big realization for me, having built teams before, that where we'd had ISAs, inside sales agents, SDRs, lots of different types of roles that were helping on this inbound lead flow, is really to have an experienced sales agent, to VA, whatever name you give to it, somebody that is going to be an extension of your team and can really convert at a consistent rate. And we'll talk about what those metrics look like, but these are the three ingredients that you need. And the big kind of consistency gap tends to happen in 2 and 3, right? If you don't have the right nurture flows, and then if you don't have anybody actually following up, because let's face it, it's not going to be the agents, right? Because that's not where they feel the highest return on their time is. And so those are the 3 ingredients that really need to be in place.
Amazing. So how do we do this? Like, how do you put a whole system like this together?
Well, I think the first and foremost, I mean, you've got to have a platform to actually manage it. I mean, I think this is a space extremely well, Jennifer, as well, and your team do. So I think making sure that you've actually got it working end to end. I mean, to go back to the question we talked about before, what's the biggest obstacle to this? I think I see a lot of teams out there who kind take the analogy of a car, right? If you want a Ferrari, the reason a Ferrari is a Ferrari is because every single element, right down to the last nut and bolt, has been thought super carefully about. And it's not like they've gone out and got a great engine, but they don't have any brakes and they've got wonky steering, because that's how you end up in hospital, right? Or they've got amazing brakes and the terrible engine. Like, you've got to have every element working together. And so I often see people say, well, we're generating great volume of really affordable leads and the quality is great. Okay, great. So when did you last call them? Oh, maybe, well, we'll get on it, we'll get on it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I think you've got to have the whole thing together. So the way that we really see, you've got to have the system. You've got to have, either Facebook or Google PPC typically are the two most consistent sources of leads. I mean, we can get those at pretty good rates. Have that come into a CRM that you're properly tagging everything that comes in, so how you're going to nurture it, where it came from. I mean, just to give you an example, like Google PPC, the big difference there versus Facebook is that when it comes into your IDX, you have hand raise signals with Google PPC that really help you to know who you should call first.
Mm-hmm.
Did they favor to property? What price point are they searching? And so, making sure that you're properly tagging and nurturing, that's an important piece. And then how do you have the ISA know who to call first, have a system where they can consistently make those calls, clearly be heard, it works every time, and the whole thing's tracked. And so that you have a reporting, the KPIs, the conversion rates, and then that can get booked into your calendar as well.
Amazing. I mean, we have a few clients on here, so they've heard me talk about that kind of stuff before, but I feel like this really just ties it all together. Like, you can set up a system, but you need to have consistent follow-up too. So you need to know, like, you should be able to answer the question, when's the last time you called them? Should be able to say that by knowing how your system works, right? Like, you should know that I always call people every 2 weeks or whatever that looks like. There should be some consistency there.
Definitely. And I think the bit that is not necessarily clear before you go through the process of building a system like this. And actually, I just mentioned super quickly that for anybody who stays on, we actually do have something a little bit later that we're going to be giving some stuff away, some material that actually can help you put a system like this in place within your own business. But, as you get into this, the volume of calling that's required is kind of overwhelming, right? I mean, on average for our clients on a monthly basis, we're making anywhere from 300 to 500 calls. On a weekly basis, it's, it can get 150 up to 200. And as the lead volume increases and we build up that kind of body of potential leads, and we've got them all graded and organized, there's a lot of calls to be made, right? And so that, again, is why I don't think it is the right expectation to put it on the realtors. Actually, it really does need to be the ISA who can eventually maybe progress into becoming a realtor, right?
Yeah, awesome.
And I'd be happy if you want, I can go through maybe a few of those pillars in a little bit more detail, if that would be useful to everybody.
I think so.
Okay. Well, maybe we start with the first one, which is cost-effective ads. There's some big differences between Facebook and Google, obviously. Google is great because it's higher intent. Usually when you've captured that lead, somebody was already searching. They were already determined to find a house. They're maybe still not ready to do viewings and things like that yet, but they're at a place where they had that intention. And so, especially when you're looking at the ones that are interacting most frequently, favoriting properties, requesting a tour, requesting a viewing, things like that, that can be a great source of lead. Typical cost per lead would be anywhere from, depending on the area, $15 up to $25. I mean, sometimes you can get it below 10, but they tend to be a little bit more expensive, but the intent is higher.
Okay.
Facebook is interesting because so many people will tell you Facebook leads are trash, that it doesn't work and all of this. In our experience, and we've done this in a lot of different states across the US now, Facebook is actually surprisingly effective if you know the kinds of ads to run.
Okay.
And that's the bit that I think people sometimes get stuck on is, not knowing how to capture the lead, not knowing the kind of ads that they need to run.
Yeah, because that's been our experience a lot of different times where we've used various companies where, we'll even just turn off the Facebook ads because PPC is so much better. So I'm interested to see how you go about doing it properly.
Yeah, and it's really, I mean, properties are what motivate people at the end of the day. And so a lot of it comes down to using the right kind of photography. And literally we do color testing. So making sure that we got the right kinds of colors for that market. This sounds strange, but when you group together different properties, there are certain colors that will come to the forefront, and certain of them will catch people's eye more than others. Because what you're doing is you're stopping the scroll, right?
Okay.
That's what you have to do. And so usually when they're not performing well, it's because the property wasn't a good fit for the market. You're experimenting with something that is just not aligned to the intent of the person you're trying to connect with. And, or you've got a testing strategy that's not working. A lot of people will try and change too many things at once. When you're testing, you have to change one thing, test it, or, max two things. People will change everything and then they don't really have a baseline to test against. So those are a few of the ways that you can kind of run into problems with Facebook and waste some money. But once it's dialed in, and I mean, if you stay online to the end, we'll give you that QR code, and literally, I've got like a whole tutorial that shows you how to set them all up. So
awesome.
So maybe we talk about the second pillar briefly, is just the effective nurture.
Yeah, let's touch on that because I think that's a big one.
Yeah, and there's a few. I mean, you've got to get engagement. That's really the only purpose. Yes, education, and that is kind of part of the tone, but mostly it's, can we find out a little bit more about what you're looking for? Maybe set you up with a custom home search, right? So that's one of the things that we'll do, not for Google PPC, but for Facebook definitely, because you haven't set them up with a custom home search just yet. Usually you're sending them to the IDX, to the property search, with a kind of pre-filtered search, but it hasn't been customized for them just yet.
Okay.
And so the engagement, the nurture flows are trying to really get them to respond. So a couple of little tricks that work kind of well. I mean, one is you want to make it short. You want to write it as though you're texting for real. Like, think about what you would actually text, not what you want them to know, because that we end up in kind of more educational, longer form text, but just checking in with you. Hey, I just got back to this. Can you tell me a little bit more? And maybe leave it open, and then follow up with let me know in what 1 minute afterwards, right? All these things, signals that make the person feel like they're really talking to a real person, you on the other end, and make it feel as natural as possible.
So do you do these all automated? Is that kind of how your flow generally looks? Is that some of these are automated and then you have like ISAs touch in at certain points as well?
Yeah, so we have automated flows that deal with everybody who is not yet engaged, because until they actually engage, for us, they're a potential, but they're not an actual, right? So,
Okay,
so as soon as we get an engagement, we basically stop all automated nurture at that point.
that makes sense.
The ISA team get notified and they jump on that, and then they will take over the conversation. So now they are talking to a real person on the team.
Yeah.
And they're making calls and they're also texting. And we do close appointments with clients who just want to stay on text. They're like, don't call me. I don't want to chat. I just want to stay on text, and that's fine.
Okay, awesome. So then, I mean, let's jump into the last pillar, because I feel like that's the one, obviously, that we've all kind of landed on. Like, that's the toughest one.
It is. And I think this is, I wouldn't have come in to run this kind of agency if I knew it was just about providing the leads, because that wouldn't have, it doesn't solve the problem. There are so many lead providers out there and so many different ways. I hear from my clients all the time. They're like, I don't have a lead problem. I have a lead conversion problem, you know? And the ISA is the key to that. It really is. And having seen a lot of, you know, really successful sales teams, the difference between an average ISA and a really good ISA is like night and day. It's like having, you know, think about the best realtors, you know, they're expert sales people, right? And the best ones are amazing, right? So it's a real lifelong skill. Is how to have that empathy and how to be able to convert. So just to give you an idea, a good conversion rate is about, I would say, 4%, which is leads into booked appointments. We aim for 6%, and you know that's kind of best in class. And when when you bring somebody new onto the team and you go through and actually train them up on that, a lot of it is going to be making sure that they can read who they're speaking to, have the empathy to make that connection, to read the different personality types that are out there. If somebody comes on, they've got, you know, that kind of New Yorker style. They come in, they're a high D, as in that they're very direct. They want quick answers. You've got to mirror and match that personality type. You can't be slowing down and giving them too much information on a call. You've got to keep up the pace and mirror and match so that they feel seen. That's a big part of it, the kind of coaching that we do, like daily coaching calls and review calls, things like that. And I say, you know, finding ISAs, thankfully, is a lot easier nowadays online, where you can post a job description, you can put your application page up there, you can start posting it in Facebook groups. I mean, we found that Facebook groups are actually a great way to do that. If you find the right groups, you post your application link in there. We get people to record a Loom video. That's a pre-step in the interview process. We want to hear vocal tone. We want to hear pace. We want to hear the types of, like, we ask interesting questions on our applications, like, when is it, if ever, acceptable to lie? And this is one of those questions that it's fascinating to hear the responses, because you hear ethical reasoning, you hear you know, people who will tell you what they think you want to hear, which is never. I mean, that's not true, right? White lies. There are certain situations sometimes that, you know, you might say something to, you know, preserve somebody's sanity, or to not inflict pain on somebody, or you're in a dangerous situation. Like there are some nuances to it. Let's say it's not a black and white, and there's no right or wrong answer either.
Yeah,
it's a good one.
I feel like I'm gonna have to start doing that on some of my job ads. Ask them just wonky questions and see what they come up with.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have the Loom as well. So you know, I sometimes ask to, when you record the Loom, is at the end of the video, it could be any, it doesn't have to be Loom, you know, what's one one interesting fact that people don't often know about you, something like that. It's just, and it just gets them to show their personality and not freeze up.
Amazing. And you need to know their personality if they're going to be talking to this many different people. Like, you need to kind of figure out who they are and where they're at in life.
And it's a hard job as well. I mean, let's be honest. It's like, one of the reasons that there's quite a bit of turnover even when I see clients, hire their own ISA teams, people don't turn up, they don't start, or they don't stay with them for very long. It's because it's a hard job, and you need to really be on top of that process and find the right people who see it as a progression point, eventually into real estate or eventually into a fully fledged sales role. And I think that's the value, right? Is you can get great people who are really aspiring to become an agent could make a great candidate for an ISA role to begin with.
Awesome. Okay, that's great. I mean, all of this is amazing feedback. I'm so excited to see the QR code and what you have in store for us.
Yeah. Well, I know everything that goes into building these systems. I know any help is appreciated. So let me just show you this. Can you see this?
Yep.
Okay. There you go. Sorry about that. So yeah, if you hold up your camera, you should be able to get to that QR code. And look, we put a lot of time and effort into this, so I hope you find it helpful. But basically, it goes through and it shows you exactly how to set up your Facebook ads from scratch, like how to get the permissions in Ads Manager if you've never used it before. There's kind of 3+ hours of tutorials in there where I just go through everything literally click by click. And that's what, it's what we're using today, like in 2023. So don't listen to the people out there who say it doesn't work anymore. It does work. It still works. We have a Canva template in there as well. So you don't have to know Photoshop or anything like that. You just drop the images in to that Canva template. And then I think probably the most helpful thing out of all of this is really the hiring guide. So we've got a 15-page hiring guide that goes into, when should you hire an ISA? What KPIs should you manage them to? How should you track it? How should you coach them? What should you train them on? Like, it covers that whole thing kind of soup to nuts as a good intro for you. So yeah, hopefully that helps.
This is gold. Thank you so much for putting that together. Like, this right here, we've had so many different teams try and hire ISAs and try and manage them. And it's tough. This whole thing is a really tough part of the business. And this is awesome that you put it together. Does anyone have any questions for Simon that we can answer about PPC or hiring an ISA or anything like that?
I made everybody shy.
I know. I think you just gave so much information. They're just waiting to dive into the class.
Absolutely. And it is, there's a lot, right? I mean, it is kind of overwhelming. But yeah, I'd love to answer any questions, definitely.
Awesome. Well, do you have any other tips or tricks, Simon, that you want to share before we let everyone hop off?
Well, it depends really what people want to know about, because there's so many different places that we could go with this. But I guess ISA is probably the one that I think I see teams aspiring to most and not sure where to start. So, just to share a few things, like, I think biggest question I hear is like, when are we ready for an ISA? When does it make sense to bring them on the team? And I would say there's a few things. First of all, you've got to make sure that you have enough lead volume. There's no point even hiring somebody part-time and you don't have enough calls for them to get up to speed and get that conversion rate higher. So I would say they need to be making at least 20 calls a day. Ideally, it would be eventually up to 60, 80, even 100 calls per day. And also, you need to have enough new inbound lead volume. So at least I would say 5 new leads per day. and an existing body of leads, even if they're age leads, of about 2,000 leads, because that's going to give them the chance to actually try and revive some of the older ones. They're going to look on your property search website, your IDX, and they're going to look at all the hand raises, who's favorited a property, how many times have they logged in the last 30 days, all those sorts of signals. And as long as you've got all of that in place, and the other thing is have 3 months pay in the bank, right? And if you look in the hiring guide, we've got recommended salaries depending on if you're hiring onshore or offshore, because both models can actually work, and depending on what your needs are. But yeah, those are the things I would say you need to have in place. And yeah, I mean, obviously you've got to be ready to spend some time listening to calls, doing call reviews, and all of that good stuff as well.
That's great feedback, because we've hired a few different ISAs at a couple different teams, and it takes time to train them and get them really rolling in the database where they can actually start having closings. So I think the 3 months pay in the bank is a super important key. Like, give them time to really start working and get rolling with everything they've got going on.
Definitely. And the other obvious one that we sometimes see gets missed, especially for offshore, they've got to have a reliable internet connection. And we actually test this. So you can't even get to the interview unless you can give us a speed test report that will show that you've got at least 25 meg consistent broadband connection, because making calls over the phone, really it's going over the internet these days. So it's a really important tactical piece that gets missed sometimes.
It is, because we know we've all gotten those really bad recruiting calls that you can barely understand anything that's happening, and we don't want that happening to your real estate clients.
Definitely. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Simon, thank you so much for putting all this together for us today. And, those of you that are on the call, or if you're listening afterwards, definitely, log in and use some of these courses that he's put together, because I think some of this is going to be absolute gold.
Yeah, thank you so much. And hey, it's been so fun working with you as well, Jennifer, and your team. So I know you know a lot about this, how to put this all together as well. So it's been great.
Awesome. Well, everyone have a great rest of your day.
Cheers.
Bye.